20, 30 years ago, the Nigeria oil and gas scene was dominated by the international oil companies, the big 6 or 7. So here in Nigeria, you have the Exxons, Shell, Total, Agip, they're all here. But over the last 5 to 10 years, what we have seen is an increasing number of indigenous companies who essentially have entered into the Nigeria oil and gas scene. It's in this space that there lies a huge opportunity, because you're seeing the emergence of a truly capable, a truly professional E&P companies and service companies operating in our sector. And I dare say that the onshore swarm domain is turning into the domain of the indigenous companies. Currently, I would say in excess of about 15 to 20 blocks have been divested by the international oil and gas companies into the indigenous hands. And also, when you look at the amount of resources and reserve base that sit in this portfolio, they're about 20-30% of Nigeria's reserve base. And I would foresee that by the end of this decade, it is possible and feasible that indigenous companies will be producing 10-20% of Nigeria's daily production. I think typically people say that the below ground risk of the Nigeria oil and gas sector is small, it's minute, it's the above ground risk. I'm going to focus primarily on the above ground risk. Today, the restructuring of the national oil company and the other parastatals that play in the governance of the oil and gas industry is urgently required. The omnibus bill, the petroleum industry bill, which is currently in the Senate, is going through a lot of discussions. And I personally believe that we've got to simplify that bill into 3 or 4 segments. One that looks at the restructuring to turn NNPC into a truly commercial, competitive national oil company, competing with the indigenous and the international companies that exist in Nigeria today. Separating the role of the regulator and making sure it is an effective regulator. And separating the powers of the minister. Typically, the joint venture framework where government funds its share typically requires anywhere from $10 to $15 billion on a yearly basis to fund all the plans of all the joint ventures. Because of government's inability to fund at its level, all the JV joint ventures have to reduce their scope of their plan in line with government's ability to fund. And that has not been sufficient. And that is why we haven't been able to grow production above 2.5 million barrels a day in the last 5 to 10 years. There should be other sources of funding. And I think this is where another opportunity exists for investors. I think this industry, either in the downstream, in the midstream, in the upstream, will require, on an average, $25 billion investment on a yearly basis for the next 5 to 10 years. Today, the downstream is not an investable proposition because of the controlled and regulated pricing we see in the products that come out of the downstream. And we've all been talking in Nigeria for the last several years about the whole issue of subsidy. Government needs to move to a deregulated market so that investors can come and compete on a fair and competitive basis. Infrastructure would not be built if it's based on regulated pricing. And for First TMP, we have made some key conclusions. We're going to be in a low oil price environment for a lot longer. That means oil price hovering between $20 and $40 for probably the next 12 to 24 months. What does that mean for us? That means that we must make sure that the cost of developing and operating our assets must be sub $20. We've actually picked a target that our unit technical cost must hover in the $10 to $15 range. This lower price has made us thoroughly look at the cost of our project, thoroughly challenge the development plans, looking for simpler and cheaper ways of getting things done, and seeing how we can actually do more for less. Our view is that it's going to be a very challenging year. It's going to be a year that differentiates the well-run, well-governed companies with the best assets over those who are not well-governed or well-run. We want to place ourselves at that pinnacle of one of those companies that are well-governed, well-run, know what they're doing, and can deliver value to a range of investors.